Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the meeting of the Tulare County Board of Supervisors. We will stand and begin our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. Will be led today by Supervisor Townsend.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Item 1 on our agenda today is Board of Supervisors matters, and I will go to the far right of the political spectrum. I mean, my far right, Supervisor Townsend.
That too. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone, all 8 of you. Good to see you. So, obviously, Sunday was Easter Sunday, and it was celebrated quite a bit differently this year, as you all know, but it was a beautiful day, and one of the probably positive things about all of the restrictions that everybody's living under right now is it probably did help everyone to focus on the true meaning of Easter, the Resurrection Sunday, and so it was very nice for us, and we were blessed to have a beautiful place that we could sit on the deck and look at that as we contemplated the meaning of Easter. So it was a great time. On Monday, I joined for the first time the Governor's Forest Health Task Force call. I didn't realize that Supervisor Crocker was already going to be on there. Denise England was on there. Nancy Woods was on there. So we had 4 of us representing Tulare County on that call. And it was a real interesting conversation about the monies that are out there, the things that are going to be coming down, the things that we might want to be getting in line for. And so we're having a follow-up call. Looks like we're trying to put one together for tomorrow to brainstorm a little bit further on what we can do on forest health. So excited to maybe try to get some projects in line and not miss out on any of the funding that's going to be coming down. Later on yesterday, had a call with Hopper. We talked about the Porterville Developmental Center, what's going on there with the Herman Construction Group coming in, working under the Army Corps of Engineers and putting together the 246 beds in 6 different existing buildings there at PDC. I believe they're having a tour this morning of the construction going on. They're already, I think I checked yesterday, it was about 43% complete with what they were doing, the Corps was doing there. And they're looking at April 22nd for the completion date. So it was an amazing 15-day process to put these beds in place. So it's kind of mind-blowing as an architect to look at that and see how quickly that can move if all of the restrictions and all of the red tape is taken out of the way, how quickly that can move. So that's about to happen. I talked to Hopper about that. And also about what the county's been doing in response to the virus and what we're doing with the workforce and how that's been going. Just kind of updated him on that. And then the thing that we've been talking about a lot this last week is the early release of inmates and the zero bail, which we'll be talking about as one of our items in a bit, about a letter in response to that. But just about our support of the sheriff and the DA, who we see in the crowd this morning, and with this really crazy town stuff that's coming down that we're having to deal with. So he was real thankful for that. He was real surprised at some of the stuff we talked about on that zero bail. So that will get out there a little bit more. And then just a quick note that with everything being canceled, the Porterville Fair was canceled with the others. But something that's interesting is they're going to continue with the junior livestock auction because it's such an important thing for the youth in the community. And so I had some conversations yesterday with how we can help to support the livestock auction. It's all going to be online. So the kids are sending out their letters now asking for support. And so if you get a letter from one of them or would like to help with that, just know that that's going to be on, and they will need some people to buy or to add on to the price per pound so that the kids will make a little bit of money on their project. And then this Monday the 20th will be our TCAG meeting right here, and also with the phone-in option, which I may take advantage of again. All right, and that's about it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Supervisor Crocker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to echo some of the things that Supervisor Townsend stated. It was a great Easter this past Sunday, and I hope everyone was able to enjoy it and be able to really reflect on some of the positive things. And I agree, I was able just to spend some time and a little bit of solitude and reflect on and how God's working around here. Yesterday, as Supervisor Townsend mentioned, the Forest Health Working Group, we met, and it's multiple supervisors from different counties were on, so don't feel, so that's encouraged. So if any of the other colleagues want to join as well, it's open to all county representatives. I think the main focus, easy, Jason. Wow.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a states group. It's a states group, so it's not, I don't know. It may be Brown Act noticed. We were good, though. One of the key takeaways was there was the administration, the Newsom administration is looking at unspent funds for forest health and specifically on tree mortality, and there's a preliminary recommendation to shift those funds from counties that haven't spent them to counties that have used 100% of their funds. Unfortunately, we're one of the counties that still have funds remaining, and so that's some of the follow-up that we need to make sure that we're not losing any dollars because of various scenarios. One of the things that was noted by another county is that they didn't think that it was necessarily fair for individuals who are being prudent with their dollars, that are really that are getting projects done under budget, that they are going to be losing out in dollars because they've been more efficient than other counties. And we think that there's some of that element with us as well. So just making sure we have flexibility to keep those dollars and we have projects available, I think, is really the key, because we're still the heart of tree mortality in California with, I can't remember what our new numbers were, but whatever our new numbers were 32 million, 31, yeah, a lot of trees, a lot of dead trees. So that was that. A note on the TCAG front that's or transportation related. Caltrans has been shifting their work, and so hopefully we'll be seeing more work on our state highways and roadways where things that were scheduled later on in the year have been moved up and taking advantage of less traffic on roadways. Not necessarily in our area. I know that it's down a little bit, but we're still there's still quite a bit of essential workers from the agricultural standpoint, and so there's more work that's getting done. They're taking advantage of daytime conditions rather than having to shift to nighttime, and taking advantage of the low cost of oil for repairing that. So that's should be a benefit for once this crisis is done and over with, that we'll have better roadways when we can begin traveling again. This Thursday, the Air District has a meeting I'll be joining. The National Association of Counties has a Western Regional call as well in the afternoon. Friday, there's a tentative San Joaquin Valley Policy Council meeting scheduled, but I need to verify whether or not that's still going on. Monday, as noted, TCAG will be hosting a meeting, and as long as we have the shelter-in-place policy, we've decided that because the board chambers has the ability to do teleconferencing and has some great technology, that the meetings will be here from here on out, and then utilize the technology so that people can still call in and not have to figure that out from different locations like we normally meet. And then there's also a tentative Veterans Advisory Committee meeting Monday as well. That's all I have.
All right, Supervisor Valero. Only one page.
Only one page.
Can I tell you what the first line is? Good morning, Tulare County.
Exactly.
Is
Good
that right?
morning,
Okay.
Tulare County. You got that right. All right. Well, good morning, Tulare County. I hope everyone enjoyed their Easter last Sunday, despite our current circumstances. Yesterday, I attended our Tulare County Law Library meeting telephonically. Although we didn't have a quorum, we discussed patron use, fiscal impacts, and library renovations. And so it's great that during this time, they've been able to renovate the building or the law library due to the lack of patrons and shelter in place. Tomorrow, I will be attending the Kings Basin Water Authority meeting via Zoom, and then participate in the town hall Spanish language town hall for the county thereafter. Our Kings River East GSA board meeting scheduled for Thursday has been canceled, along with the American Red Cross Sound the Alarm event, which was also scheduled for Saturday, and that has been canceled. I'm looking forward to our TCAG and TCAT board meeting on Monday. And then yesterday, I submitted a letter on behalf of the community of West Goshen to express my strong commitment to supporting Grid Alternatives and Dimension Renewable Energy's joint bid to develop a community solar project under SCE's Disadvantaged Communities Community Solar Green Tariff request. This will support 127 households in West Goshen. Self-Help Enterprises is a community energy navigator program manager for the various San Joaquin Valley pilot projects across our communities. I also want to reiterate United Way Tulare County's efforts to support our most vulnerable communities. United Way just released a press release yesterday and stated that it is committed to helping Tulare County residents during times of crisis. So the nonprofit organization is providing multiple resources for people who have concerns about their well-being and financial stability during the COVID-19 pandemic, including a relief fund designed to provide aid for residents and nonprofits affected by the current public health emergency. And so that's just, again, to reiterate the many services and agencies that are here to support. As mentioned last week, Proteus, CSET, United Way, and other organizations. And then lastly, thank you to our Animal Services Manager, Casey Heffington, for her work in creating a safety plan for pets should pet owners get COVID-19. So just thinking about our animals and pets and how they need to be safe during this time as well. And that is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Shucklin.
Sure, thank you, Chair. Last week, I teleconferenced a CSAC board meeting, which was nice to see some of our colleagues from other counties and hear what's happening within their counties. I also did present, as Supervisor Townsend asked me to talk about what role CSAC is taking in the opposition of the early release, which is something they are working on. I also had a call with Cal OES. I will be having that weekly on Wednesdays at 2 p.m., and it's basically updates from the emails and all that we've received, but it is an opportunity to ask questions and whatnot. Yesterday we had our Health Advisory Committee meeting, which was well attended through Zoom. It was very nice to have Karen Elliott, our Public Health Director, and Dr. Hott speak to the group and give updates and be able to answer a lot of questions from our Health Advisory Committee members. I then went over to HHSA and I did a video regarding COVID-19 and our homeless population and what is happening there. This morning I was on another Zoom meeting with District Attorney Ward with the Visalia Chamber of Commerce Government Affairs Committee, where Mayor Link, myself, folks from Congressman Nunes and Assemblyman Mathis were just giving different updates regarding their take and what they're doing during the COVID-19. And then tomorrow we will have our Homeless Task Force meeting at 1:30. That's it.
All right, thank you, Supervisor Shucklin. A few things I wanted to cover this morning. Again, especially during this crisis that we're all enduring, I wanted to thank our county employees who are on the front lines of dealing with this, whether you're providing services directly or your lobbies are closed and you are providing services over the phone or through the computer. I sure appreciate the hard work that you are putting forth in keeping this county running and providing vital services to our residents that all of our residents depend upon. Yesterday, I participated in a Zoom Governmental Affairs Committee meeting from Tulare. That was a good meeting, and I think that it's very important that our various businesses realize the resources that are available to them during this time of lockdown, shutdown, when their customer base may be severely restricted, if not altogether eliminated. So on that call, we featured Rich Mostert from the Valley Community Small Business Development Center. I think it's very important that we take advantage of what the Small Business Administration is providing to our business constituents. Also refer them to the Tulare County Economic Development Corporation, who has a lot of different resources available to them. We want to help. We want to keep our businesses going as much as possible and provide any resources to those who are seeing dire straits and not seeing very much opportunity in the future. This afternoon, I will be filming a COVID-19 update regarding the senior services that are available to Tulare County residents. I think that's also a very important vulnerable population that we make sure is aware of all of the resources, special hours that retailers may be open, et cetera, because there are a lot of seniors that are very limited in what they have access to, and so there are a lot of businesses out there who have made special hours for them and brought different services to the table as well. This evening, I will be participating in the Tulare County Farm Bureau Youth Leadership County Day event. That's always a great event that's put on for outstanding young leaders throughout Tulare County. This year's event will be a Zoom meeting, which will be very interesting, but appreciate the service being offered to our youth so that we at the county can showcase what we do and how we do things, and also remind our bright youth from the county that there's always opportunities to come back and give back to the county and work for Tulare County someday. So that's all that I wanted to specifically cover today. We will now move on the agenda and take up item 2, which is a request to receive an update from the Health and Human Services Agency on COVID-19 status and response efforts in Tulare County. Mr. Lutz.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, CAO, and County Council. Tim Lutz, Health and Human Services Agency Director. I will try and keep it relatively brief. Again, there's a lot of activity that's been happening. Trying to condense all of that into a concise report can be a challenge at times. Unfortunately, last week we did continue to see that strong upward trend in our cases. As of this morning, we were at 296 cases. From prior week, that represents approximately a 95% increase in our cases. The week prior, which was March 31st to April 7th, we showed a 230% increase at that point. Initially, we were getting approximately 20 new cases a day in the beginning of last week, and now we're upwards of 30 to 40 cases per day. We've had a total of 13 deaths, and 15 people have fully recovered.
Tim, before you leave that, how many of the total cases, I know that we have a seemingly large number of cases for our county population, and that's highlighted within the San Joaquin Valley. How many of those cases are directly attributed to one facility?
Yes, Redwood Springs, and that's what I wanted to also highlight, unfortunately is a large cluster for us. Redwood Springs, of that 296 cases, Redwood Springs is 148 of those numbers. And that's as of this morning, where we have 101 residents that have tested positive and 47 staff members that have tested positive.
Thank you.
Redwood Springs has consumed a lot of our time at the DOC, understandably. We being public health, have been working with California Department of Public Health, state licensing, the Redwood Springs facility administrator, as well as the corporate parent company of the facility to try and address this outbreak. We were able to conduct a site visit this last Saturday, April 11th, where our staff, our nursing staff, and Department of Public Health staff were able to go through and kind of assess the operating structure of the facility and highlight needed changes, provide on-site training. Staffing continues to be a significant challenge for this facility. Last week, we were able to coordinate a meeting with all of the local area hospitals who also came to the table to provide some staffing to help the facility. We've put in a request with the state for state resources in way of staffing. Unfortunately, the registry of potential medical personnel at the state level is not yet active, and we're anticipating between a 4 to 10 day delay for when we get that staffing. So best case, we get some staff from the state at the end of this week, but probably it's going to be into next week before we see staffing from the state to assist. We continue to do daily check-ins on the facility, make sure that on a day-by-day basis they have adequate staffing to remain open. Our absolute worst-case scenario is having to evacuate this facility and move those residents to another facility.
How many are left, Tim?
I believe census yesterday was 129, 28 or 29, one of those two. So there is still a significant number, and at this point, if 101 residents total have tested positive, some of those have been transferred out. Unfortunately, some of those have also passed away. So that doesn't necessarily mean all of those residents that are in there are part of that 101. But that is our absolute worst case. We're working very hard to keep staffing there so we do not have to evacuate that facility.
Thank you.
Yes. So typically what we're looking for is they're able to test twice with having negative come back on both of those tests. So it's a pretty strict, narrow definition. In reality, you could have a lot of people who are, either had mild symptoms to begin with or had more severe symptoms and have since gotten better. So the 15 does seem low relative to our cases, but it's also within that narrow realm of that definition. Touching briefly, Porterville Developmental Center was also mentioned, and as Supervisor Townsend noted, there is a site visit probably starting in roughly a half hour or so to go through, look at the construction. Army Corps has been moving very quickly on that project, which is great. In talking with the state, there are 3 primary categories of placements that would be going to Porterville Developmental Center. Those who are too sick to stay at home, but not sick enough to need the full services of a hospital. Typically, we would refer to those as lower acuity individuals. So also those who have been hospitalized are recovering and are able to step down in the level of care that they need. And lastly, skilled nursing facility patients that do not require acute care hospitalization. Ideally, that would be a group that we would be moving from Redwood Springs. The challenge is there's only 29 beds that are for that skilled nursing category, so there still wouldn't be enough to place them. And then briefly, summary of activities by the DOC functions. Our media inquiries continue to be high. A lot of them are on Redwood Springs. We're trying to provide as much information as we can, recognizing that We're one of a number of counties in the state where we have an outbreak within a skilled nursing facility. We fielded over 35 media inquiries, did 5 live Facebook interviews, a podcast interview, and importantly, we are coordinating the upcoming Spanish language town hall that's aimed to try and address concerns to our farm worker community and Spanish speakers. The liaison function, we are working with Tulare County Medical Reserve Corps to solicit volunteer nursing students, retirees, others from the nursing profession to try and assist with staffing shortages. Right now, the immediate need obviously is Redwood Springs, and we're looking at calling the campaign Calling All Heroes. On our homeless liaison, I think we have a pretty solid plan and a lot of the key logistics worked out. We have 2 hotel agreements complete, 3 more pending, over 100 rooms available for placement. We've identified food, laundry, and cleaning as how we would provide that and coordinate that. We're also working with Quia Delta on their bridge, I'm sorry, not their bridge program, their, drew a complete blank on what it's called. Street medicine, thank you. Thank you, Sam. On their street medicine program, a lot of things flowing through my mind these days. On their street medicine program, and they're also looking at potentially doing testing in Tulare and Porterville through that program with us. The goal being to try and get better surveillance into the homeless population and see if COVID is running rampant through that group or not. At this point, our service levels for the homeless individuals has been very low. In process elements, we're still working out security, storage of property, and the ongoing case management for those individuals when we receive them. Ultimately, that will likely roll into our multidisciplinary team process that I'll talk about when I get to our HSOC. Our business liaison group received 145 calls. A lot of calls are concerns about businesses that are operating that are non-essential. The core ones, gyms, salons, barbershops, pet grooming, smoke shops. Also received many calls reporting where restaurants or stores are not enforcing social distancing or employees are not wearing masks. Typically, what we're doing on that side is reaching out to those businesses. If they're essential, we'll provide guidance and distancing, putting tape down, making sure you're spacing out, how you're avoiding contactless or creating contactless types of transactions, things like that. We'll provide technical support. And then significant milestones on operations. Yesterday we were training 3 DA investigators. Thank you, DA Ward, for loaning us those investigators to assist. That'll be tremendously helpful on our contact tracing. Given the number of cases continuing to go up, our public health nursing staff is just overwhelmed trying to keep up with contact tracing. The DA investigators, by nature of their jobs, are uniquely situated at being able to pick that up really quickly and assist that team. And then lab statistics. To date, we've tested 1,562 tests through the public health lab for Tulare County residents. For all of our testing. Of that, 1,325 have been Tulare County. Every week, we see that increase in the number of tests that we're getting. And we've distributed 48,802 items of PPE to 3 hospitals, 9 skilled nursing facilities, and 3 clinics that are performing COVID testing, and as well as a few ancillary county programs or businesses that are essential. Lastly, the approximate cost to date, $860,459. Moving on now to our Human Services Operations Center. We continue to run that in parallel to our public health's DOC, but both are reporting up or funneling up to the EOC to ensure we're coordinating services across the county. Bigger areas within that area right now, community food outreach team. We're doing weekly calls with FoodLink to discuss any concerns they might have and coordinate resource requests with the state. The team did contact all 30 food pantries in the county to assess their needs. We have identified Goshen that has closed. We're attempting to make contact with that facility to identify what we can do to help get that reopened. And then we also connected City of Porterville with FoodLink to assist with the closure of Helping Hands. Again, I'm trying to make sure that we're identifying where there might be gaps in local services, but also wanting FoodLink to be the primary food coordinator for the county. Also, quick notes, in-home supportive services providers, California Department of Social Services has obtained 250,000 masks and gloves for IHSS providers. The public authorities will receive that PPE and be responsible for distribution. Because it is limited to 250,000 is still really low relative to the need across the state. That PPE is for providers with prolonged exposure in caring for a person who is positive or symptomatic. We also did provide PPE to Child Welfare Services and established a protocol to provide direction for distributing or utilizing that PPE, inventorying it, and tracking those cases. Our MDT team, I want to take a moment here to talk a little bit about the jail releases, recognizing what a concern that is for the community. Our MDT liaisons and our access managers for our behavioral health clinics are working to schedule appointments with the 37 inmates who will be released. If that number goes up, we'll obviously continue to reach out to any of those inmates that are being released and try and coordinate care. The MDT at this point is consistent of our CalWorks program, housing, mental health, alcohol, and other drug, and they're working with the inmate discharge nurse in the jails, which is through the contracted provider WellPath. There's a lot of complexity on these cases, and in looking at it, there's probably going to be a pretty high need. We definitely recognize the massive concern, and we're trying to allocate the resources as we can. It's challenging given just the nature of we're trying to reinvent how we operate without being able to make contact. And we are getting reports just from our mental health providers that doing telepsych for all of our patients is a challenge. It's difficult to identify some of the key things they're looking for in some of our severely mentally ill clients. And there's also a certain level of paranoia of technology that some of our clients have. So it's a complex situation that we continue to try and evolve and adapt our approach. We continue to see an increase in demand for services through behavioral health. We moved from 7 admissions per day in in January and February to 7.5 in March, and now April is 10. We also had 172 consumers that previously hadn't been seeking services for the last few months re-engage. And then, fortunately, the state did allow us to begin providing services via phone for our substance use disorder clients. Initially, we weren't able to do that and receive billing for it. I know behavioral health directors lobbied hard to try and get those changes, and the state did that last week for us. And that concludes my report, unless there are specific questions from the board.
I have a request from Supervisor Eduardo Valero.
Gracias. All right. Well, I have 2 questions. The first one is that I've had a great number of people ask me about our reporting out. And I know that we've sent out a map indicating positive cases per region. Will there be a move similar to Fresno County where cases are identified by cities and towns?
We had that discussion yesterday, and we are moving to that. So what the challenge we've had, again, if you take the strict definition of PHI through HIPAA, it really constrains what we can put out. CDPH has, given COVID, kind of issued better guidance that we're following. And basically what we've, based on our population, so what we can report is kind of based on population. We can report in cities where we have 10 or more cases. So what we're going to start to do then is break those out for our cities that do have that, and then others will be lumped in that category of fewer than.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. And then another question. Has there been any discussion on an exit strategy for the county or the region as a whole when it comes to emerging from shelter in place? And so, although I don't know where we're at with that, Governor Newsom did mention a West Coast pact for reopening economies just yesterday. So curious to know where Tulare County is on that and if HHSA has been looking into this.
We are finally starting to hear some information come from the state on that topic. I think from the perspective of EOC, that's where probably our next direction is going to be once we know that we're at that peak surge and know that now we're looking at slow downward trends. Then we start to put out the planning of what areas could we reopen, what does that look like, and how are we being consistent with what the state guidance is. So I would expect that in the next couple weeks, and that's part of where the DOC piece responding to the immediate pandemic, and then the HSOC responding to kind of the long-term, what are going to be the needs in the community will start to come together through the EOC process.
Thank you.
All right, Supervisor Townsend.
Thank you. Tim, other than PDC being used as a surge, there's been some other rumors out there that there's other facilities. Have you heard of any other facilities that the state's looking at in our area as surge centers?
In our area, no. I know that they looked, I think there were 2 or 3 other developmental centers that the state was doing a similar thing with. I also believe there was, beyond the developmental centers, there are alternative care sites that they were looking at. That I think there was one in Fresno, and then a very large one in Sacramento with repurposing an arena. But nothing has come up for what the state would be looking for as an alternative care site in Tulare County beyond PDC. We, as the county working with the hospitals, have looked at alternatives, one of the alternatives being Convention Center, and I think that was what Quia Delta was strongly looking at if the need arose.
Okay. There was a couple of other rumors that were circulating sort of up in our area, and I just wanted to kind of quell that rumor, so thank you for that.
There is a rumor. I haven't heard it. We'd be happy to run it down if you want to send me some of the details or connect me with someone.
All right, thank you for that. Thanks for all you're doing, and if there's anything else we can do, make sure tell us what you need.
I will. Your continued support is good. I know a lot of staff are listening to this report and the board comments. The staff continue to just be amazing every single day. I'm grateful to have a group as dedicated as they are.
Thank you.
All right, Supervisor Valero wants another bite at the tortilla.
Now, just for a quick clarification, do you know when we will see that reporting change out to the public with regards to the cases by city as opposed to the regional map?
We discussed it yesterday. I think I saw some preliminary drafts, so I hate to give a firm number, but my hope would be we could probably see something by the end of this week.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Crocker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Tim, for another great update. I just would encourage you all as, and your department with the Redwood Springs, just to keep us apprised of that. That's, I think, our chair kind of alluded to it with some of the questions, that this is really the lynch point for our, county. And so making sure that we can do whatever is possible for, those individuals and for the staff, I think is really, key to what we can do. And as Supervisor Townsend said, whatever we can do to help, we'd be happy to do that. But thank you for your staff and for helping to coordinate and making sure that they have the adequate staff to keep that running.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the questions for you, Tim. Thank you for the report. I think it's helpful to hear directly from you on a regular basis. I think that members of the public can come to expect to be able to tune into the board meeting to get those direct updates. And Mel, do we have any questions from anyone on this item?
Mr. Chair, not yet, but we are on a delay, so we may just give it.
Okay. Well, thank you, Tim. Appreciate it, and stay healthy
Thank you.
and keep up the great work. Okay, next we'll take up item 3, which is public comment. At this time, members of the public may comment on any item that is within the jurisdiction of the Board of Supervisors, but not on today's agenda. Public comment can and will be limited to 3 minutes. Is there anyone wishing to speak under the public comment period?
Mr. Chair, we do have a call coming in.
Okay.
Good morning. Thank you for holding. You're now connected to the board meeting. Please state your name and address for the record. Your 3 minutes will begin now.
Blanca Escobedo, 119 Linda Vista Drive in Lindsay. Good morning, board. I'm calling once again to urge you all to pass an emergency evictions moratorium in the county of Tulare. It's really important to listen to the communities that have been falling behind because of coronavirus. They can't pay their rent, they're falling behind, and you have the authority granted by the state government to pass a moratorium to halt evictions for tenants and homeowners during this time. It's really important to do so because the state orders and the Judicial Council's orders don't go far enough, and without local action, you will see a tidal wave of evictions after those protections are lifted. It's really important to make sure that people stay in their homes, not just right now during the pandemic, but afterward as the recession is still going to be present. And people aren't just going to have the money to come, they are not going to come up with the money right after people go back to work. They're going to need some grace period of minimum about 6 months. So we urge you to exhibit local leadership to protect the health and safety of Tulare County residents, and especially the most vulnerable populations, such as undocumented people who aren't receiving state benefits or don't qualify for the federal stimulus. So please act. We have sent you a letter and a draft template moratorium, and I'm happy to answer any questions later by email. Thank you.
Okay. Are there additional public comments?
Yes, we do have another one.
Okay.
Good morning. Thank you for holding. You're now connected to the board meeting. Please state your name and address for the record. Your 3 minutes will begin now.
My name is Myra Becerra. My address is 15966 Avenue 327, Ivanhoe, California. And I'm calling to urge, first of all, thank you, board members. I know this is a trying time for all of us. Time is difficult. Everybody has a lot on their minds, but I'm calling to urge you regarding an eviction moratorium. I feel that you guys have a lot more power and you guys can use it to help all of our residents. The board is not being preventive. We need to establish something before this has a negative impact. Once the moratoriums from state are lifted and shelter in place is lifted, then we're going to turn around and see a lot of people being affected negatively. There's way too many residents that would be impacted. Lots of people lost their jobs. Or if some of them didn't lose their jobs, they just lost hours. There's a need for you guys right now. You guys are our leaders. We're turning towards you. And I would appreciate it if we were able to help our residents now to prevent something versus later when we're having to help pick up because we weren't able to help them on time. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional public comments?
No, there are no other comments.
Okay. Any public comments from members of the audience here today? All right, seeing none, I will close the public comment period and move on to take up our consent calendar, items 4 through 13. Do any board members wish to remove any items from consent calendar for separate consideration? Members of the public? Okay, seeing no one, Chair will entertain a motion. Have a motion by Supervisor Shuckley and a second by Supervisor Townsend. Please vote. Motion passes 5-0 unanimously. Thank you for that. We will now move on and take up our untimed portion of the meeting agenda. Take up item 14, which is a request from the Treasurer Tax Collector to approve a proposed fee schedule regarding payment plans to pay off property taxes owed effective July 1st, 2020. Welcome back, Mr. Cook. 2 weeks in a row, what lucky board we are.
Pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. So it's a request to change our fee schedule, and it's actually a reduction in 2 of our fees, a redemption payment plan and our special payment plan. This allows for taxes that are late to be paid over 5 years. The reasoning behind this is we took a deep dive into our fees and looked at where they were at, and these 2 fees stuck out to us. First of all, this is a fee for people that are having issues paying their taxes, so it's already a difficulty for them. So we want to be very careful in that fee and make it as close to the cost to the county as it should be. So we reviewed our operations, and due to our increased efficiency in the department, we were able to do the work to process these payment plans in less time. So due to that efficiencies, we're able to charge less. Secondly, we also looked at what other counties are charging for these fees, and the proposed fees fall in line with most other counties within the state. So based on those reasons, we're proposing a fee reduction.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Cook? Let's see,
Mr. Chair, not a question, but just a comment.
yeah, sure, go ahead, Supervisor Crocker.
I appreciate you bringing this. I think this is an excellent move, something that is really looking at just what's common sense and looking at best practices and that continuous improvement. I know that our assessor recorder brought something last year as far as reducing taxes. Now you're coming forward reducing fees. I think this is excellent, makes a lot of sense, and I'm happy to support this.
Okay, any additional comments? Thank you for looking at ways not just to bring fee increases to the board, but also fee reductions where it makes sense and you can gain those efficiencies with it. I think it's very important. So Chair will entertain a motion at this time. All right, we have a motion by Supervisor Crocker, a second by Supervisor Valero. Please vote. Oh, is there any public comment related to this fee reduction? Okay, seeing none, we will accept the votes. We have a motion again by Supervisor Crocker, second by Supervisor Valero. Vote passes 5-0 unanimously. We will now move on to take up item 15, which is a request from the Board of Supervisors staff to go on record in opposition to the early release of offenders due to the threat of COVID-19.
All right. Good morning, Chairman Vanderpool, members of the board, CAO County Council, Samantha Ferrer, board representative, here before you this morning to bring back this item. It was, staff was directed at last week's Board of Supervisors meeting to bring forward opposition from the board regarding the early release of offenders due to the threat of COVID-19. So attached to your agenda was a draft letter to the California Judicial Council for your review, and this morning I'm here for feedback or any edits that you may have. The letter was also published with the agenda and made available to members of the public. For a brief little bit of background, on April 6th, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Judicial Council of California issued an emergency rules order that essentially directed that potentially dangerous inmates must be released from the Tulare County Jail on $0 bail without consideration given to the threat they may pose on their victims and/or the general public. However, this ruling does not take into consideration the work that has been done in Tulare County to help stop the spread of COVID-19. On March 11th, Tulare County's public health officer declared a local emergency due to the threat posed by the COVID-19 virus. Your board ratified this proclamation unanimously on March 17th, and we have taken all steps to implement and support this determination. To date, while there has been 296 positive cases, from all publicly available information, none of the positive cases or deaths that we have seen have involved court, law enforcement, jail personnel, or inmates. Tulare County, along with Sheriff Mike Boudreau, continue to implement robust plans and procedures to keep our jail inmates and the staff that serve them safe from the virus and any other threats to their health that may occur. Through these efforts, the county has protected public health while also protecting public safety by continuing to incarcerate inmates serving out their local sentences or determined to be too dangerous to release pending trial or other disposition of their case. It is very important to note that our jails are not experiencing overcrowding and do not pose or do not contribute to the spread in our jail systems of the COVID-19 virus that seem to be present in other correctional facilities and perhaps the basis of this emergency order. The effect of this ruling does trickle down and has significant impacts here in Tulare County. This order significantly limits the ability that our criminal justice partners, the district attorney's office and the sheriff's office, have to keep those that have been arrested and charged with their crimes in custody. I'm also seeking direction from you this morning regarding sending additional letters to local courts which would share the board's opposition to release early offenders within Tulare County due to the spread of COVID-19 because of the negative effects it would have on our community, including those who were victims of crime and business owners and the community in general. In summary, due to the fact that our county jails are not experiencing overcrowding and that to date there has been no outbreak of COVID-19 in our jail system, the record before you, or the item before you this morning is to officially oppose the early release of nonviolent offenders and to provide staff feedback on the letter drafted and for any additional letters that you would like to send regarding this opposition. I know that our District Attorney Tim Ward and Sheriff Mike Boudreau are here this morning for any questions. Thank you for assistance on this, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have as well.
I think before we take any questions or comments from board members, I'd like to give an opportunity to both the sheriff and the DA to see if they would like to come forward and make any remarks regarding this. Sheriff Boudreau, you actually dressed up. You get to go first.
Well, to our chairman and vice chair, and to our county council and members of the board, good morning. Thank you for hearing us. We do appreciate it. Thank you, Tim, for allowing me to go first this morning. Let me start out by saying that I do want to give compliments to our leadership with our CAO as well as our HHSA director in targeting and spearheading a proactive way of dealing with the COVID-19 in Tulare County. I do know that we have an elevated number, but we've been able to isolate and show exactly how come those numbers are elevated, and they have been truly aggressive. And I just want to give thanks to Tim Lutz and also Jason Britt. Also to my colleague, Tim Ward, he probably won't give the due regard that he needs, but he has been incredibly aggressive in working for law enforcement in this county, trying to keep those people who are egregious offenders where they need to be, and that's behind lock and key, in our opinion. Public safety is a priority of mine as well as our district attorney. He immediately gave a phone call to me and working with in partnership in identifying those people who would need to be in our jail system. The balance becomes he also has a judicial system and judges that he works with, and I'll allow him to really speak on that more than I, but I do want to give him compliments for his hard work and dedication and what he's done working with not only just my agency, but also the police chiefs of the county. The Tulare County Chiefs Association, so the board is aware, signed a letter as of yesterday also voicing strong opposition to how the judicial order is coming from the Chief Justice as well as our local magistrate. Now let me say this as well. We do get along with our magistrate. We do get along with our judges, and we're not here to voice a personal opposition to any of them as an individual. My opinion is based on what I perceive as the best benefit to public safety. So having said that, what we started to do in our jail system was develop an aggressive and surgical process in identifying those inmates who come through the doors of our facilities. We have medical staff through WellPath who have done an outstanding job in testing and asking pertinent questions in regards to those people who are coming into our facilities to help identify those who may or may not be exposed to COVID-19. That is a very surgical process, and so let me explain some of what we've put in place so that you're comfortable with the decision that you may make today. We did put in a quarantine plan, meaning that we have 2 different modules which is completely empty, sanitized, and ready for anyone who may be exposed to COVID-19, that they could be isolated from any of the other inmate population, as well as identified staff with protective PPE, with protective equipment. That's in place. Fortunately, we've never had to use our quarantine plan. Not to say that we won't have to use our quarantine plan, but we do have a quarantine plan. Case in point, Kern County Sheriff's Office has 9 identified inmates with COVID-19. I spoke with Sheriff Youngblood as of last night and said, are you releasing these inmates? How are you working with your COVID-19 exposed inmate? And doing exactly what we have in plan. He has an isolated quarantine area for those inmates, and they are not being released, but they're being treated and watched and placed on a 14-day separation from the other inmates. And they'll be 14 days past once they become healthy again. And so, having said that, we have the same plan in place. The other is we've had several inmates come in saying that they've been exposed to COVID-19. I immediately give a phone call to Tim, who has just been outstanding. He returns my phone calls within just minutes, which has been so fantastic. But we've also had staff that have claimed exposure. All have been tested, our staff as well as the inmates, all of which come back negative. Now let's talk about the inmate that does come into our facility who says, or that arrested person that comes into our facility and says, yes, my cousin had COVID-19 positive and we were hanging out with them at a party. I believe I've contracted COVID-19. They're immediately placed into isolation and a reverse airflow isolation cell. And so what a reverse airflow is that they're not pushing anything out through the doors. It's being reverse flow out of the facility. So the ability of reverse airflow isolation is something of a benefit that we have. So having said those categories of a quarantine plan, which is in place, following the standard, the industry standard of what other sheriffs are doing in the state, not completely releasing inmates, as well as having a qualified medical staff, a plan in place from leadership that we've put in place from the very beginning, and as I like that you said earlier about a robust plan. We took this very seriously. I don't want anyone to believe that me standing up here thinks that we're not taking it seriously. We are. We're taking it seriously. We don't want our inmates exposed. We don't want our personnel exposed. Now, having all of that in place, my priority as sheriff is public safety. We average 1,700 inmates a day. Since the court order releases, since the issues that our good district attorney will touch on here in a moment, that he's been fighting against, is people that are being released on a grand scale. My inmate count as of this morning was right around 1,000. We haven't seen 1,000 inmate population in our Tulare County jail facilities since the 1980s, which means that I have 700 open beds to place inmates in. So when one of the criteria is overcrowding, it's clear to note that we are not overcrowded. We have 700 beds that we can easily put inmates in. We have 2 modules of quarantine, plus South County facility, which has a module of quarantine which has been sanitized. I can easily take 300 to 400 inmates, place them in quarantine, if need be. Fortunately, we haven't had to do that. Now, some of these inmates, which our district attorney will touch on, and I'll step away here momentarily so that he'll have that distancing, those inmates that are in our facilities are there for a reason. Fine, upstanding men and women in uniform made arrests in their cities and our county to make sure that safety is priority and number one. What we are doing here is placing those people back into our society to reoffend, in my opinion. Many times law enforcement will say, well, hey, we were able to arrest him on this category. Well, that's one category we were able to arrest, not recognize the potential of other categories of impacting crime that is occurring in our cities and our townships of Tulare County. I just feel that this may be a suitable process for the state prison systems if they have multiple people within a state facility that needs to be released or released into a hospital, or the medical condition is outside the scope of what they're able to handle within the institutions. I can understand that. But in speaking to my fellow sheriffs across the state of California, none of us are experiencing overcrowding. None of us have the inability to provide adequate and proper medical care for those inmates who should be in those facilities serving justice. And finally, I'll wrap up with this. I do understand the need. I understand the importance of us taking it seriously, which in the beginning of my presentation indicated we have taken it seriously. And you have taken it seriously. I, as the sheriff, have taken it seriously. But the categories of which allow us to do those releases doesn't meet the scope of what we need to present for our public and the public, for the safety of our public. And so with that, I would just encourage you, I realize that the document itself doesn't carry the legal standing, but it does very much send a very clear message to the constituency and the citizens of this county that first and foremost is their safety. And finally, not one person has mentioned our victims. We have victims. We have people who have committed crimes against our victims. Not one person has said, let's stand up for the victims of this county where crimes have been committed. The only thing I've heard is let's release inmates and have them come back another day, which I feel is unfair and unjust. So with that, I'll conclude and turn it over to my dear colleague, District Attorney Tim Ward.
Sheriff, I just want to let you know I commented on behalf of victims last week. So there are people that are advocating for them, but I don't think that those who are advocating the early release of inmates are advocating for the victims in the way that they should be. So thank you for your comments, and thank you for the work that you are doing and the men and women of your department are doing to keep our community safe. It is critical.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for those comments.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board, Tulare County District Attorney Tim Ward. It's always a pleasure to come before you and speak to the board. I will tell you today, I'm especially proud to represent a board who is willing to take a stand on an important issue such as this. I will tell you that one of the areas that I and many of the colleagues of elected DAs around the state have taken up
with the Chief Justice's order and the guidance that she has sent down to the individual presiding judges. One of the things that we've questioned is there's a lot of vagueness in it and a lot of discrepancies and a lot of holes in it, but the reality is what it's attempting to do is place a one-size-fits-all solution to problems that aren't necessarily consistent in each of the counties in California. As you can imagine, the counties in California differ greatly. The challenges that Los Angeles faces, the challenges that Sacramento faces, even Fresno, Merced, Monterey, those aren't necessarily the challenges that we face here in Tulare County. One of the particular issues that I have with the Chief Justice's order is the fact that I believe it overlooks the fact that Tulare County imposed, starting April 1st, they created a brand new operational courtroom to hear nothing but motions by the defense bar on behalf of inmates that were currently in custody, and that is now, as you know, it's been reported on, called the release calendar. So backing up a little bit, when the COVID crisis started, the Tulare County courts did consolidate operations. Initially, 2 criminal departments were running in Visalia, 2 in Porterville, 1 in juvenile. They further consolidated. Right now, we're running 1 general criminal department in Visalia, 1 general criminal department in Porterville, and 1 criminal department in juvenile. This April 1st department was a brand new, dedicated courtroom to hear nothing but release motions. Who was coming on to that calendar? Well, I can tell you the initial focus were sentenced inmates. So inmates that were convicted of crimes, whether they be misdemeanors or felonies, that were housed inside Tulare County facilities. When that process started, I reached out to the sheriff, and I give great deference to Mike and his team and what they are doing inside his custodial facilities. There was not as was argued in these motions, some type of emergency situation inside those facilities. So we opposed every single release of sentenced inmates, quite frankly, regardless of the time they had left. Part of that is the fact that when we had those convictions, in a way, weren't they a contract? We, as the prosecutor, may have made them an offer on whatever day. If you agree to do 365 days, we will tell the victim that you're doing 365 days, and this, that, and X, Y, and Z, and in return for that, your benefit of the bargain is we will maybe reduce your counts from 4 to 2, right? We entered into a contract. Unilaterally, those contracts are being violated. The other group were inmates that were pending trial. Okay? At the time, for the first week of April, those inmates that were in custody had some degree of a bail category attached to them. So in a way, we call it a release calendar. Some of it was motions to reduce bail. Some of those were granted. Some of the motions were to release on their own recognizance. Many of those were granted. We were, I believe, statistically, about 60% of the people that went on that early release calendar were granted release. I think, don't quote me on the number, I can get more accurate numbers. I believe we're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of about 80 to 85 people that first week were released over our objection. Then what happened is, as you know, and the purpose of today, on last Monday, the Chief Justice issued those parameters and the report that came out. We first saw it and began to get involved really on Tuesday and Wednesday for the first time. There are many parts of this order that could potentially be beneficial. There's an allowance for prosecutors and the courts locally to do hearings via video conferencing, to allow testimony to be given via video conferencing. That is a good and positive thing. We've not yet implemented that here in Tulare County. There's some challenges with that. So the order was grand and more broad than simply this one area. but realizing what was potentially coming, because we did not have a meeting of justice, the partners, if you will, until Friday. And initially, when the order came out, it was supposed to take effect Friday night at 5. That was extended until Monday at 5 p.m. As the sheriff gets up here and compliments us, I will tell you that they are the ones that deserve a lot of credit. When we started seeing where the cards were going to fall, we reached out to him and Under Sheriff Sigley, and in a short amount of time, they provided our office on Thursday with a listing of every inmate in facilities in custody here. Our staff worked round the clock Thursday night, and the courts have imposed, as their operations have been impacted, and they have staffing issues, just as every other business in our county. They've imposed a deadline for us to file motions by noon. So if we're filing a motion to be heard in 48 hours, it has to be filed by noon. So we worked around the clock Friday night, and by noon on Friday, we were able to identify those individuals that we feel were potentially eligible for relief. I'll tell you the one thing that we discovered in this process. The people that Sheriff Boudreau have in his jails generally deserve to be there because they are either in custody on or serving time on serious and violent felonies and are not subject to relief in the first place. So I think from a grand scale, if you go back in time, our justice system here is working because the people that are in custody should be in custody. They are not subject to relief under the new rule. But there are, I believe, a few hundred people that are potentially eligible, and we did file motions, and those are being heard as we are speaking here this morning. I will tell you that one thing the order does on those cases, it removes our ability to argue for release drastically. The Chief Justice all but removed and stripped our ability to argue factors. So I don't want to provide any false hope to the board or the members of our community that we're going to be successful in each and every one of these. There simply aren't a lot of grounds with which we are allowed to object and oppose release. We will see how today's and the next coming couple of days events unfold with those motions. So that's certainly one concern. The second concern, as the sheriff touched on and members of law enforcement, is going forward. Many victims, especially businesses, and I'm thankful that in the language that the board is looking at in the letter, you specifically talk about the impact on businesses in our communities right now during this vulnerable time. Many times, these quality of life crimes happen, whether they be vandalism, whether they be trespassing, and victims, often business owners, they want one thing. They want the offender arrested and removed from my property. Just make this person go away, right? And our law enforcement agencies were effectuating arrests and delivering those people to the sheriff's department, and they were being housed. Up until the criminal process started and the arraignment, and again, getting back to our the original point, we have a process in place here. We are one of the pilot program counties in the state with this pretrial release program. We have a robust, that's a term that's been used a lot lately, pretrial release program. There is a mechanism in place already for arrested individuals to have a pretrial risk assessment done on them. But our victims want one thing. They want them arrested and taken away. This emergency order severely impacts law enforcement's ability to do that, because what is the reality? If they effectuate an arrest and deliver upon the sheriff's department when that individual is not required to post any money to make bail, what are we doing, right? So I applaud the sheriff and the board for focusing on victims of crime and our businesses out there. They deserve a voice. Whether this letter effectuates the Chief Justice in making any changes and allowing us to make changes is one thing, but I think what it does is it sends a message to our communities. It sends a message to our victims, it sends a message to our business owners, and it sends a very loud message to law enforcement that you stand with them. It is amazing what they are having to endure right now in our communities, and this is really a slap in the face to them. I will tell you that as written, there are a number of glaring discrepancies in this order. There's no such thing as a low-grade felony. That is subjective. If you're a business owner and you've been a victim of burglary, to you, that is not a low-grade felony. I would dare, if we were to take a poll, every single person here would agree that child abuse is not a nonviolent crime. Elder abuse, human trafficking, forced labor, human trafficking, all of those crimes are subject in the order to a no bail requirement. Here's one that we discovered thanks to the sheriff. The sheriff has people in custody that have been arrested because they failed to register as sex offenders. They've been convicted of sex crimes and they have failed to register as sex offenders. They are in custody. Guess what? Under this order, they're subject to potential release. Now, to be clear, we're arguing against that in every way. Here's the most glaring discrepancy, I think. And I know that I've worked with the DA's Association and other DAs around the state to make sure that the Chief Justice is already aware. Right now, as it stands, a person can be arrested for a felony offense and already be out on bail or out on their own recognizance. Or going forward, a person can commit a new felony offense and be out on their own recognizance or zero bail. That individual can pick up a new felony crime and potentially be charged with the special allegation of committing a new felony while out on bail or out on their own recognizance. That carries an additional punishment. Guess what? Unless the new felony qualifies as a serious or violent under very limited categories, such as strike offenses, we kind of know what that means, that individual could be subject to no bail. It simply does not allow our communities to come up with an individualized, specific, needs-met directive that is beneficial for all of us. Again, I applaud you for taking a stand with victims. I applaud our Sheriff's Department and what the men and women of his facility and Under Sheriff Sigley were able to do in a short amount of time and provide us with that information. It's quite remarkable. At any given point in time, the sheriff's told us how many people he has and the issues that they're facing, and we're communicating that in court. To wrap up, I want to thank you. Thank you for taking a stand to our profession and for our victims out there. I'll tell you, this has been tough on morale for our office because we see people now that had motions to be released last week, 2-3 weeks ago, that were denied. But under this rule, they're back on calendar today and the coming days. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. So from that regard, thank you for taking a stand on behalf of the men and women in the office of the district attorney. And we'll be happy to answer questions.
All right. Any questions for either the sheriff or the DA? Thank you for coming today, and thank you for the work that you and your men and women are doing right now, Tim. It doesn't go unnoticed. Any further questions for our staff or comments on the letter that's being proposed, Supervisor Townsend? And I will open it up for public comment after we are done.
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, not really a question because everything's been outlined really well. Just a thanks really to everybody. When I heard about it and brought it up last week, had no idea how convoluted it was and how bad it was, way worse than what I thought it was when I brought it up. And that's what I've learned. We subjected Sam working from home to putting this together, kind of threw it at her to word this thing, and so she was going through and doing a lot of research, and in County Council, Deanne and County Council doing a lot of research on it, and then having the conference call and getting everybody, the sheriff and their staff, and just talking about where we are with the thing. And so really happy with the draft letter that's come out. It seems to address everything. You know, the one thing about it is it seems like it's the least that we could do to just say something, to just come out and say this is crazy, come out and say we need to oppose this at every level. And so, you know, I just feel like it's not enough, but it feels like our hands are tied and that's all we can do, and so we're going to do what we can do and wait and see what else we can do to help. I'd like to see us send a copy of the letter to all of our state representatives and to the governor's office, just a copy of it. Like to have it sent to our lobbyist, Sacramento. Probably CSAC and RCRC would be good. Maybe just to show our support, we could also send it to the Tulare County Chiefs Association that Sheriff Boudreau mentioned, and maybe the California State Sheriff's Association that has also, we use some language there. And any others that maybe the sheriff and the DA would like us to send the letter to if we approve it this morning. But thank you so much for Sam for all of your work on it, and Deanne for stepping up and putting some time into that to put that language together. Really appreciate it, and look forward to passing this to at least give that support. Thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor Townsend. Supervisor Crocker?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the points I was going to make, Supervisor Townsend mentioned as far as the adding our local delegation and some of those groups. I think the only other edit in the second paragraph where it states how many positive cases and deaths, just to state as of, and then choose a date, and then pick that,
Of course.
pick whatever that number count is for that particular day. And then I just want to echo many of the sentiments that have already been stated, that this is really disgusting, how people are trying to take advantage of a situation with the pandemic to push forward an agenda that has nothing to do with what's going on with this sickness. And I agree wholeheartedly, whatever we can do to help protect victims, to help protect our communities, we need to do.
Thank you.
All right. Any additional comments from my colleagues? I know that a comment that I was going to make is I do like the existing list of CCs that were on the letter. I think it's important not only that we show our sheriff and DA that we are standing and advocating on behalf of the work they do and the victims that the DA prosecutes on behalf of, but I also think it's important too that we are going on the record with our own local presiding judge and any discretion that he may have here within Tulare County and his orders to be mindful of the safety of our communities as well. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment calling in?
None so far.
Okay, any public comment here within the chambers? All right, seeing no public comment, the chair will entertain a motion. We have a motion by Supervisor Townsend, a second by Supervisor Shucklian. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you for being here today, both Sheriff and DA, and for Sam for your work putting this item forward. Much appreciated. All right, next item on our agenda is item 16. Board members may make a referral to staff to have a matter of business be considered for a future agenda. Are there any such requests at this time? Okay, seeing none, I will look over to my left. Council, do we have need for a closed session at this time?
Yes, we do. Items A through E will be heard in closed session. I do not expect any announcements out.
Okay, thank you for attending today's Board of Supervisors meeting. The public open session of our meeting is now adjourned, and we will convene in closed session. Stay safe and healthy.